I am a Yank in Sussex. 11 miles off the coast of Devon in England lies the small island of Lundy. And it is quite small, just 3 miles long, north to south, and just a hair over a half-mile east to west. My first sight of it was when we were visiting Clovelly in North Devon back 3 years ago in 2018. The British bride said then that she had always wanted to visit the island, but hadn't yet been able to. Not knowing a thing about the place, it didn't make an impression on me at the time. But during our recent holiday in Devon, the opportunity to visit the island presented itself, and so we extended the holiday by a couple of days to take advantage. Accordingly, we reserved a day trip on board the MS Oldenburg, the ferry which plies between Ilfracombe, Bideford, and Lundy during the summer months. During the week we were able to do the day trip, the Oldenburg was sailing from Ilfracombe to Lundy, so to Ilfracombe we drove. Now, even if you're not going to visit Lundy Island, Ilfracombe and its harbor are worth a visit in any event. Ilfracombe itself is a very nice town and has been settled for a very long time, well before even the Romans invaded England 2,000 years ago. Its antiquity is demonstrated in its very name. Whatever Ilfra signifies, and there's disagreement among scholars about that, the suffix combe, pronounced cum, comes from an old Celtic word meaning valley, usually understood simply to mean a small valley through which a watercourse does not run. This suffix can be found in place names throughout southern Great Britain, and so it's worth keeping in mind for future reference. There are, for example, several towns and villages in Sussex whose names contain it. As I said, Ilfracombe is a very nice and picturesque town and not to be disregarded, but the biggest tourist attraction since 2012 is an enormous statue in Ilfracombe's harbor called Verity. It sits close to the pier where the Lundy Island ferry takes on and discharges its passengers. We came to Ilfracombe for the first time a day before our trip to Lundy, and since neither of us had heard of the statue before, we were quite surprised by its sudden appearance as we found our way to the port's parking lot. The statue was created by famous English artist Damien Hirst, who has become rather well known for large-scale or even monumental sculptures. Mr. Hirst is actually local to Ilfracombe, as he resides in the nearby village of Combe Martin. What is this about the statue's name, Verity? Well, quick research yields this. Verity is a female first name and a surname. It derives from the Latin feminine noun veritas, meaning truth. It was adopted in England as a Puritan and Quaker virtue name, truthfulness being considered a desirable attribute, especially in a female, and following a new Protestant tradition of naming children after virtues instead of saints. When I first saw the statue, I was quite startled, and was put to mind of the Colossus of Rhodes, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, a huge statue of a naked man with his arm outstretched, that the people of the Greek island of Rhodes built 2,800 years ago, likewise at a harbor. This statue echoes that of the original Colossus in being naked, except in this case the statue is a very pregnant woman. With her upraised sword, the statue stretches 66 feet above its base, which consists of law books. Something I didn't notice immediately because I was standing on Verity's left-hand side is that her right side is partially skinned, exposing her skull and her fetus. I'm not entirely sure why she's been skinned, but I imagine that the artist had what he thought was a good reason, full of symbolism of some sort. Hirst describes his work as a modern allegory of truth and justice. Hirst maintains ownership of the statue. It's only on loan to the town of Ilfracombe, and in 20 years the town will have to give it back. Now, the way the statue stands, or in other words the placement of its feet, refers to the Edgar Degas statue titled Little Dancer of 14 Years. As you can imagine, the statue caused quite a bit of controversy among the local residents, some in favor and some aghast. The members of the North Devon Council considered that the statue would improve tourism in the area, expecting that many people would come just to see the statue. This expectation has apparently been fulfilled. Standing above Verity at the harbor, and for a much longer time, since 1321, is the old St. Nicholas Chapel. It was originally dedicated to St. Nicholas because he is the patron saint of sailors, among others. The chapel sits atop the steep hill called Lantern Hill and served as a place of worship for the residents and workers in the port. But when King Henry VIII dissolved the monasteries in 1540, it ceased to be a consecrated chapel. Starting about 100 years later, though, it began service as a lighthouse, and the building served also as the residence of the lighthouse keeper. For example, the keeper John Davy and his wife lived in the chapel from 1850 to 1871, and while maintaining the light, raised a family of 14 children. Today, the chapel is maintained by volunteers from the Ilfracombe Rotary Club, and there's a small museum inside telling about the chapel's history. In a nod to the chapel's original religious function, the old porch has been converted to a chancel, and occasionally religious services are conducted here. Visiting the chapel is free, but donations are gratefully accepted to help with the cost of maintaining the museum. Statues and chapels aside, we were here to catch a ferry. The MS in the name MS Oldenburg means motor ship, and it signifies that a vessel is powered by an engine of some sort. The Oldenburg has 2 Cummins diesel engines that drive her at 12.5 knots in calm seas. She was built and launched in Bremen, Germany in 1958, and for the first 27 years of her service, she served as a ferry and cruise ship between islands in East Frisia on the North Sea coast of Germany. In 1985, she was sold to the Lundy Company Limited to replace their old ferry. She carries up to 267 passengers, and on the day of our cruise to Lundy Island, she was nearly at full capacity. About 20,000 people a year make the day trip to Lundy. I don't have any information about how many spend multiple days there. Note that the Oldenburg also sails from the port of Bideford, as well as Ilfracombe, and this varies depending upon the tide. Sometimes it sails from one port and returns to the other. You have to examine the sailing schedule to see what it is for the time you want to visit. Sailings are usually 3 days a week on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, with additional sailings on Wednesdays during July and August. The voyage takes an average of 2 hours, depending on ports, tides, and weather. And while the schedule out of Ilfracombe is consistent, out of Bideford it varies quite a bit. I presume that's because a fair amount of the trip includes the estuary of the Torridge River, and the ship would have to be careful how it navigates, thus increasing the voyage time. There's food and drink available for purchase on board if you need it. Sometimes, if the weather is bad, the captain will decide that the journey cannot be made safely, and will cancel the trip. It's also possible, though unlikely, that the ship might make the trip to Lundy, but worsening weather could make the captain decide the ship has to stay in Lundy instead of sailing back. This is probably why the ship only sails during the spring and summer. If you get stuck on Lundy in this case, the Lundy Trust will put a helicopter into service to return travelers to the mainland. Not free, of course, but at a reduced rate. But if the helicopter can't fly due to the weather, one might be stuck on the island until conditions improve. The weather for our day trip was quite calm, thank goodness. By the time we got on board, all the outside deck level seating had been taken. I wanted to get some footage of our movement out of port, but there was only a single spot at the railing where there was room for me to stand, and I didn't get much. Eventually, I went below to sit with my British bride, who had established a comfortable nook for us to while away the journey, a spot with a window, so we could monitor progress. As we approached the island on its eastern side, we could see pretty much nothing but cliffs through the windows. In fact, the entire island abuts the sea with cliffs. Only the southeastern tail has a place which is suitable for a wharf or dock, and that's where the ship ties up. It's also where visiting boats tie up. If you have a boat, or if you know someone who has a boat, you can sail to Lundy Island and hang out without having to worry about space on the Oldenburg. In fact, there seems to be some attraction here for scuba divers. And of course, scuba divers don't need to tie up to the wharf, they can anchor in the bay. There's a colony of gray seals that hang out in the area, and you can dive with them as seen here. Of course, you can bring your scuba gear on the Oldenburg if you want, but the ship's schedule leaves you only 4 hours to suit up, swim, and suit down again, unless you're going to stay multiple days. Better to bring your own boat, and then you can stay as long as you like. Note that the Oldenburg sails to Lundy only from the beginning of April to the end of October. From November through March, if you want to get to Lundy, you'll definitely need your own boat or a kayak, but during the time Oldenburg is not steaming, there's a helicopter service available. Of course, it costs more than the ship and doesn't carry anywhere near as many passengers, 7 in fact. So, depending upon how many people have signed up, the helicopter may be making many flights on the day you fly. It only flies twice per week, usually Mondays and Fridays, so you'll need to bring camping equipment or make arrangements to stay in an accommodation. I should also mention that if you have a small private aircraft, there's a grass strip on the island you can use. Geologically, the island can be divided into 2 major parts. Most of the island is one or another type of granite. The most southeastern part of the island is mainly metamorphic rock, predominantly slate. As you ascend or descend the road to the top, you can see distinctly different slates butting right up against each other, such as the dark and light slates seen here. One feature I took notice of along the road is a cave entrance in the slate. It's called the Old Man's Cave, but why it's called that or what can be found inside it seems not to be recorded anywhere I could find. I took a flash photo from the entrance, but it doesn't show much. The island's granite is reckoned to be around 59 million years old, and of course granite is igneous and is of volcanic origin. Geologists have indicated that there was an associated volcano which produced the granite, and it stood over the island in some configuration. Of course, the volcano in question is long gone, eroded completely away. The slate is far older, originating with sedimentary rocks that formed around 100 million years before the granite. In short, the island is geologically old, and over the millions of years had gradually worn away under the unrelenting efforts of the climate. Eventually, I suppose it will have worn away entirely, but granite is hard, and that's not going to happen anytime soon. The human history of Lundy Island, like England itself, is complicated. Anciently, the island wasn't under continuous habitation, but evidence shows that there were at least periods of occupation starting sometime during the late Stone Age. During the last glaciation of the Ice Age, the sea level around Lundy was about 40 meters lower than it is today, making the island about 10 times as large as it is now, and what we see as the island would have been comparatively high ground. It was certainly attached to the Devon coast during that time. It's reckoned that Lundy became an island due to sea level rise at around 7000 BC. The first evidence of human presence corresponds to about 3500 BC, with the remains of the stone hut circles found on the island. But there's no telling who it was, beyond saying that they were of a Neolithic or New Stone Age culture. And from around 1000 BC, it seems that Bronze Age Celtic people arrived, evidenced by the remains of the Celtic field systems found here on Lundy. These Celts remained mostly untouched by the arrival of the Romans, and seem to have been more associated with the Welsh than the Romanized Celts in Devonshire. Even after the Romans abandoned Britain, Lundy remained unaffected by the encroachments of the Saxons, Angles, and Jutes from the continent. Even after the Normans conquered England in 1066, Lundy was still a Celtic stronghold for a good couple hundred years. Once Normanized England became involved with Lundy, however, things began to become much more interesting. Ownership and suzerainty over the island was quite chaotic for centuries, with more than one lord or owner using the island for nefarious purposes, as well as legitimate ones. At one time or another, the island was used as a base of operations for raiders and pirates. One noble family, the de Moriscos, figured largely in Lundy's early history, starting in 1155, when King Henry II ordered the family to hand the island over to the Knights Templar, who he was trying to be friends with. Obviously, the de Moriscos weren't interested in giving the island up, and despite all attempts to divest them of the place, including the capture of William de Morisco's wife and children, they managed to hold it until 1217, when it was finally decided to let them keep it. One problem, though, was that this same William was engaged in piracy during all this. The Sheriff of Devon is on record complaining about this to the king. By 1245, the de Moriscos were no longer strong enough to hold any power at Lundy, But by this point, their name was so closely associated with Lundy that today the pub operating on the island is called after them, the Morisco Tavern. It's beyond the scope of this video to dig into the complete convoluted history of Lundy Island. It would have to be a couple of hours long in order to cover it at least semi-adequately. Instead, I will just say that various attempts were made to make the place profitable for various owners and investors, but these mostly failed. One interesting matter was the case of Thomas Benson, a man of great cleverness. He was involved in smuggling and other questionable activities, including an early case of insurance fraud. In 1752, he heavily insured a ship, the Nightingale, and had it sail from Biddeford towards America with a valuable cargo. He sneakily had it put into Lundy, offloaded its cargo, and sent it on its way empty. As soon as the ship came across another ship coming towards England, his crew pretended to be in distress and set the ship afire. They were then saved by the other ship and reported the loss to the authorities. Benson's plan was to be able to recover the cost of the cargo from its insurers, while at the same time still having the cargo to sell. I guess that's an early case of having the cake and eating it too. Anyway, except that this didn't work out that way. Benson's plot was discovered, and he was forced to flee to Portugal, which is where he eventually died. Besides the Morisco family, the next most famous owners of Lundy were the Heaven family. Yes, that was their name, starting with William Hudson Heaven, who bought Lundy in 1834 for £9,870. His family owned the island for the next 80 years, and this period of their ownership constituted the most prosperous time it had ever enjoyed. It was during this time, after William Heaven passed away and his son, the Reverend Hudson Heaven, took over ownership, that the church dedicated to St. Helena was built. It was dedicated in 1897. The island remained with the Heaven family until 1918, when it was sold again. 8 years later, another owner, Martin Harmon, took control. He was notable for introducing a brand new breed of pony, now called the Lundy pony, to the island by crossing new forest ponies with horses. He also successfully introduced Soay sheep and the Sika, a species of deer from Japan. Less successful was a 9-hole golf course that lasted a total of 1 season. Two particular innovations of Mr. Harmon in 1929 were the minting of private coinage and postage stamps. The coins were denominated in puffins and half-puffins, valued at 1 penny and half-penny. Instead of the king's profile on the coins, it was Mr. Harmon himself pictured there. The stamps were likewise denominated in puffins. He got into some trouble over the coins, since coinage issuance is a royal prerogative. But the puffin stamps served to offset the cost of sending mail from Lundy, since there was no post office on the island. Puffin stamps are sold to this day on the island, and still serve to get mail from the island to the mainland. It used to be the case that to get any further, it was necessary to put royal mail stamps on the envelope as well, but now the Lundy stamps alone suffice. Lundy has thus the oldest private postal service in the world. These stamps, especially when cancelled on the island, are objects of great interest to stamp collectors worldwide. The vegetation found on the island's plateau is mainly heath, and the northern part is rich in lichens, on the rocks obviously. The rest is either a dry heath and acidic grassland mosaic characterized by heaths and western gorse. There is one endemic plant species, the Lundy cabbage, a species of primitive brassica. It is unique to Lundy Island. There have been rhododendrons on the island since Victorian times, but these invasive plants are gradually being eliminated. The island is a bird island. Among the birds found on the island is the puffin. The name Lundy, in fact, comes from the Old Norse language and means Puffin Island. Puffins are fairly famous on Lundy, but there was a period when their presence here was threatened due to rats introduced by humans. Puffins are ground nesters, and the rats could get easy access to their nests and eat their eggs. Since the invasive rats were eliminated a number of years ago, happily the puffin population is now recovering nicely. Aside from the seals, which inhabit the waters around Lundy, the mammals which live here were all introduced by humans at one time or another. I've already mentioned the Lundy ponies, the Soay sheep, and the Sika deer, but the island also harbors rabbits, pygmy shrews, and feral goats. Because the island is only 3 miles long, for folks in good physical condition, it's easy enough to walk the entire length of the island and back, well before the Oldenburg leaves to return to Ilfracombe or Biddeford. The British bride and I, however, not being among those folks in good physical condition, it took too long for us to traipse up the road to the plateau of the island. Our many rest breaks to catch our breaths made the slog take a good hour and a half. Once we arrived at the village to eat our little picnic, we were rather worn out. But to see everything on the island worth seeing requires more time than we had in any case, even if we had been able to run up the trail. If you want to see everything there is to see here, you'll either need to make multiple day trips or come to stay overnight. There are good camping sites on the village grounds, and there are also permanent accommodation quarters available. Just see the Lundy Island website, for which there's a link in the description. In good weather, because the island is far from any source of light pollution, and electricity is cut off in the evening, it becomes possible to see all the stars in the sky, and not just the few that manage to shine through the gunky air of the city. For this reason, Lundy might be a good destination for amateur astronomers. The last private owners of Lundy Island sold it to the National Trust in October 1969. The National Trust, in its turn, leased the island to the Landmark Trust in order to preserve and improve the facilities here. Landmark has gone to great efforts in this, including electrifying the island, adding gas and water service, restoring the important buildings, providing accommodation facilities for visitors, and inaugurating a regular all-year shipping link to keep the island supplied. As mentioned earlier, the Morisco Tavern is Lundy's only pub and is the pub that never shuts, though alcohol is only served during permitted hours. It's the only building on the island to have lighting after the generator shut down for the night. It serves both as a restaurant and a social center for island staff and staying guests, as well as catering for the large numbers of day trippers. A lot of the food is sourced from the island itself, especially the meat. The Lundy General Stores is situated near the pub. It's similar in size to a shop you might find in a small village on the mainland, but has a broad range of stock. It caters for visitors who are staying on the island, as well as residents and day visitors. It has not only a wide range of groceries, including fresh and frozen foods, it carries souvenirs, such as Lundy stamps and postcards, camping essentials, household goods, toiletries, and beers, wines, and spirits. If you're going to stay on the island overnight, besides camping spots, there are a good number of accommodations for visitors. But you'll need to reserve quarters in advance, since it seems that they are well in demand. We greatly enjoyed our short visit on Lundy, and if you ever get a chance to visit the island yourself, we highly recommend it. This has been a production of a Yank in Sussex. If you've enjoyed the video, please click the like button. If you haven't already done so, feel free to click the subscribe button along with the notification bell in order to be notified when new videos are posted on the channel. May you have a very nice day.